The Elder Scrolls Online recently nerfed one of the best healing sets in the game, which was especially useful for solo builds like the Magicka Templar. But don't worry, with the right adjustments, you can bring this build back to life just like I did and make it stronger than ever and even easier to play. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, HGM here. Many of you commented recently that one of my best solo builds, the God Mode Templar, needed an update after getting nerfed in the Gold Road chapter. If you don't know what I mean, basically the Chokethorn monster set no longer heals you based on passive healing triggers like the heal from Structured Entropy or the heal from Templar's Puncturing Sweep. Now this makes the set much less useful on solo builds, but don't worry, I've added tons more healing back into the build that I think actually makes it even better because you can now control it and you don't have to rely on a proc set. So let's jump right into the build update and how I made it all work. Alright everybody, here we are back on the Magicka Templar. Time for a build update. Heading into the Gold Road chapter and beyond. This of course is our 1-bar solo God mode build. And it's gone through a couple of changes which I talked about in the introduction. One of our main gear sets was nerfed, but I've added even more healing. And this build is even more powerful now than it ever was. So let's go ahead and jump into the buff stats right here. Now, just use one of our abilities here, pop my potion, and then check out the stat sheet. So about 30k max magicka, 24k max health, 14k max stamina. Recoveries are very good, and keep in mind that one of our Templar abilities does give us about 500 magicka recovery that does not show up on the stat sheet. Keep that in mind. Spell damage does go up quite a bit when you're fully buffed, using one of our new abilities. There we go, almost 5100 spell damage, 52% crit chance, and very solid spell resistance and penetration. Those go up as well when we're fully buffed too, so just keep that in mind. We do get some new armor accessible through scribing, as well as more bonus weapon and spell damage. We'll talk about that in just a minute. In terms of attributes, of course, we want 64 points into Magicka, this being a Magicka-focused Templar. Once I get past my buffs here, I can show you the main option. Best option, I think, for food is going to be Clockwork Citrus Fillet. This gives you a combination of max magicka, health recovery, and magicka recovery. So this gives you a nice spread of all stats. If this is too expensive, you can always use Witch Mother's Potent Brew. That's another excellent option as well. Mundus Stone. For this build, we've actually switched over to the Lover Mundus. That's because being a 1-bar build, I needed to free up some space for this patch. So this is going to give us very good penetration for like overland and solo content, helping your abilities do more damage. You know, as far as potions, this build is set up incredibly well. You don't need to use spell power potions. I am using tri-stat potions. That's not even necessary. You can use a basic magicka potion if you want to save some gold, and that's going to be all you'll need on this particular build because we get all of our other buffs from our sets. Finally, let's talk a little bit about the race. Now, I am still a Khajiit for this particular build. This is my favorite option right now for the solo Templar. Due to the Feline Ambush passive, this gives you 12% bonus critical damage and critical healing. And in terms of solo gameplay, this just is such a good passive that it's hard to not use this. Especially on the Templar class, where the more damage you do, the more healing you do. This just makes a lot of sense. Sort of like the Nightblade build that I recently updated as well. Khajiit is going to be your best overall race choice. Now, I do think High Elf is also very good for this particular build as well. High Elf is going to give you more sustain. It's actually going to reduce your damage a little bit when you are channeling your main DPS skill, that's Puncturing Sweep. Plus you get more max magicka and more spell damage. So it is pretty close in terms of those two races. Those are definitely my top picks. But I think that covers the basics. So let's jump into the gear sets next and see where this build has changed and adapted moving into the Gold Road chapter. First, we are using Deadly Strike. This is just a staple Templar set, still using it. This gives you weapon and spell damage, crit chance, more weapon and spell damage, and then increases the damage of your damage over time and channeled effects by 15%. So this is going to apply to all of our dots, our ultimate, and of course, our main DPS skill, Puncturing Sweep. So just like I said with the Khajiit passive, the more damage you do, the more healing you do. This just makes a lot of sense on a Magicka Templar. Now, there are different ways to run this. You can use the Deadly Lightning Staff. That's going to give you 2 set piece bonuses because it is a 2-handed weapon. And then I just used 1 piece on the body. So in this case, I have deadly boots, and then 2 pieces on the jewelry, that being a necklace and a ring. So that's going to give me my 5 pieces of deadly strike. Jewelry enchants, you'll want magic damage. I have a mixture of bloodthirsty and arcane as the traits. For that body piece, you'll want divines with a max magicka glyph. And of course, you want precise with the absorb magicka enchant on the lightning staff. Second 5-piece set is going to be Order's Wrath. Now this set is amazing, both for group and solo play because of how much critical chance and critical damage it gives you. It actually has 2 5-piece bonuses, which is pretty awesome. And it's crafted, so you can craft this in any weights and traits that you want. Now, I do recommend you pick up a heavy chest piece. This is going to give you as much armor as possible on this build. Divines, obviously, and then Max Magicka as the enchant here. And then we just went with 4 more pieces of light armor. So I've got the Order's Wrath, shoulders, waist, hands, and legs. Again, all divines, all Max Magicka for those. You can see that I'm no longer using a monster set, and that's that nerf that I talked about in the beginning. ESO did nerf the Chokethorn monster set. Previously, that gave you a ton of healing anytime you did your sweeps, because that counted as a heal. It could actually proc Chokethorn, and so you would get a ton of passive healing coming in. They removed that effect, so you can still use Chokethorn. It's pretty good on healer builds still. But for solo play, obviously, I went back to 2 5-piece sets, and now I'm just using a 1-piece monster set. That being Slimecraw, the 1 piece gives you a lot of crit chance. Plus, you can run this in light armor for even more passive bonuses. So that's what we're doing in terms of the monster set. And of course, this being a 1-bar build, we wanted to use Oaken Soul Ring as well. This just gives us too many good buffs to pass up. So we do want to use this. Now, I do have a guide for how to get the Oaken Soul Ring Mythic. If you don't have that yet, I definitely recommend you pick it up because it makes these 1-bar builds so much more powerful and easy to play. Spell damage glyph here and bloodthirsty as the trait. So that is the setup. Again, we've got 5 pieces of deadly strike, 5 pieces of Order's Wrath with the 1-piece Slimecraw and the Oaken Soul Rings. So that's going to be the mythic version. If you don't have the mythic, I do have a non-mythic version in the written guide. You can check out the link down below to see how that works and all the other alternate gear set options that you have on this build. But let's jump into skills next. So this is going to be really easy because it is a 1-bar setup, but I did make some changes over the last patch. So let's go ahead and check those out. First ability has not changed. Solar Barrage is a very good AoE damage skill for the Templar class. Comes from the Dawn's Wrath skill line. That's your second ability. I prefer the Solar Barrage more for a couple reasons. So it gives you really good AoE damage, like I said. It also gives you the Empower buff, which is if you're not using the Oaken Soul Ring, this is actually a huge buff for you because it makes your heavy attacks do 70% bonus damage. You can do a lot of heavy attack damage on this build, whether you're using Oaken Soul or not, because of this skill. Now, the other thing that some people don't know about is with the Templar class, you need to run at least one of these abilities due to the passive called Illuminate. So when you cast a Dawn's Wrath ability, you gain Minor Sorcery, which increases your spell damage by a whopping 10%. So if you're not using one of these skills, you're doing 10% less damage than you could be. Like I said, I think Solar Barrage is the best way to go. But you could also use something like Radiant Destruction to get a little bit of execute damage. If you have like a pure single target fight, for example, a boss, something like that, you could swap that out, definitely. And here's one of the big changes that I made to this build to compensate for some of that loss of healing. I am now slotting Extended Ritual on the 1-bar setup. This comes from Restoring Light, and this gives you a ton of healing, both for you and your group. It's a huge AoE heal and a very long duration, 30 seconds. So you can see just how big this is. This is going to be really nice just for even soloing because whenever you're anywhere inside the circle, you can see we get those heals coming in passively. So that is very nice. Now, next up, we have a damage shield, and you have some options here. Now, I am using the Warding Soul. This is basically the single target soul magic ability that is new with scribing. Let me show you where that one comes from. So in the Gold Road chapter, if you do the initial scribing quest, you will unlock this ability right away. And there are some pretty neat scripts that you can apply to this to make it actually a very nice damage shield. So the first script obviously makes it a shield. You could also make this like a single target ability. You could do DPS skill. You could do a single target heal, but it works really nice as a damage shield. Second script, I've used the class Mastery for the Templar. And this is where I was getting all that extra armor and spell damage. You can see for 5 seconds, You gain 1320 armor, a 150 weapon and spell damage, and you get a 50% boost to that if you're standing in Sacred Ground. Now that's the other ability that we're going to use in just a minute. So when I use those together, it really makes sense on the Templar. You want to stay in those area effects anyways. But you're getting about 2,000 extra armor and about 220 extra weapon and spell damage, which is really cool. Now the third script I've added, I like this one a lot too. Major Vitality. It increases my healing and my damage shield strength by 12%. So that bonus healing applies to everything that we do. It applies to our area heals. It's going to make those tick higher, over 3k and 7k when those critically strike, as you can see. But it also makes the damage shield itself stronger, getting that skill over 10k shield, which is pretty decent for damage shields as far as those go. Now, if you don't have scribing yet, do not worry. Templars do have a very good damage shield in their class skills as well. Just substitute Radiant Ward here. You can potentially get a bigger shield if you're fighting against multiple enemies because it does scale. And this one does damage as well, so it is a nice alternative. Also a little bit cheaper cast. So yeah, don't be afraid to substitute that if you don't have access to scribing, like I said. Now, next up, we've got that DPS skill. Like I mentioned, Puncturing Sweep. It's just a no-brainer for Templar. Does great AoE damage, heals you back. Does more healing, in fact, since we are using the scribing skill and getting Major Vitality. All of our skills are doing more healing, which is a really nice synergy. And our final normal ability, Channel Focus. This comes from Restoring Light. You'll want this mainly for the Magicka recovery. Like I said, this is 242 Magicka every 1 second. So basically about 500 Magicka recovery. If you were to put this on a stat sheet, it doesn't show up there, but that's what it does. And then the healing looks small, right? 575 health every 1 second. But remember, this doubles when you're in your rune. Remember, all of the bonus healing passes we have, you can crit for over 3k a second in terms of healing on this ability, which is really nice, stacked with our other heals, obviously. Now, for the ultimate, you do have some options here. Thunderous Rage from the Destruction Staff will be the best in terms of damage. So if you know that you just have like tons of enemies that you need to kill really quickly, Elemental Rage definitely the way to go. But I do like the guild ultimates as well. Either Fighter's Guild, Dawnbreaker of Smiting, or you could do Mage's Guild, Shooting Star. The nice thing about both of these abilities is they do stun enemies, and that's the one thing that we are lacking on this build. A little bit of crowd control can actually come in really handy, especially if certain adds do a lot of damage. You want to knock them down as quickly as possible. Something like Fighter's Guild, Dawnbreaker of Smiting, perfect for that. Like I said, if you want to see the full breakdown of skills, as well as alternate skills, check the written guide. The link for that is down below, and that's going to explain everything for you. In terms of rotation, it doesn't get much simpler than this build, honestly. You want to start by casting and maintaining your Solar Barrage. Then as you approach enemies, set down your Extended Ritual because this has the largest range. Find your placement or move the boss towards you, and then set down Channeled Focus. This way you have both heal over times overlapping. That's the ideal way to play this for the most amount of healing. And then simply spam Puncturing Sweeps until the enemies die or you need to recast your heals or your dot. About every 6 to 10 seconds, depending on difficulty, you can use that shield. You can also cast the shield preemptively if you see a heavy attack coming your way, or some other especially damaging mechanic. Lastly, don't forget you do have ranged capabilities on this build using your heavy attack, so you don't have to leave your circle. If there are casters or archers or other ranged enemies who are outside of it, I just sit in my circle and heavy attack them to death, because again, you have that Empower buff and your heavy attacks are also extremely strong on this build. So yeah, it is an extremely simple rotation. Most of our effects are very long lasting, and they're really easy to maintain. All right, champion points next. I did make some changes here, again, to help to deal with the lack of healing for that nerf. But in terms of the green tree champion points, this has really not changed. Your main slotted stars here are going to be Steed's Blessing, then Treasure Hunter, Rationer, and Liquid Efficiency. In the blue tree, I've actually experimented with a lot of different options. So let me go over those. Now, I definitely recommend you do Fighting Finesse no matter what. That 8% critical damage and critical healing is just going to stack with everything else that we do. It's going to be perfect for this build. You also will want Biting Aura for bonus AoE damage, and then Master at Arms for bonus direct damage. But in terms of your fourth slotted star in the blue tree, you can go two ways. You can either go more damage, So for that, I would definitely recommend Thaumaturge. That's going to give you more damage on those dots. But if you want more healing and you want to lean into more of that survivability, that's where you can actually go over here to the healing side of the tree and pick up Swift Renewal. This is actually going to give you 10% bonus healing to both of those main healing over time effects, your channel focus and your ritual. So you're getting 10% bonus on top of the bonus that you're getting from Major Vitality if you're using Scribing, so this does make a very big difference. So again, more damage, pick Thaumaturge, more survival and healing, go with Swift Renewal. And always, always do not forget to pick up your Staving Death sub-constellation here, especially Preparation, for the 10% damage reduction. Now in the red tree, nothing new here. The typical stars like Rejuvenation, Fortified, Boundless Vitality, and then I do recommend for your 4th slotted star picking up Siphoning Spells. It's going to help a lot with the sustain, getting Magicka back when you kill an enemy. And last but not least, if you're curious about the outfit style for this particular build, I can jump into armor styles and show you which of those I am using. So for the helmet, we're just using the Ascendant Order hat that's in light armor. For the shoulders, we're using the good old Khajiit epaulets, again, light armor. And for the rest of the body pieces, this is a Nylark's Chosen, which comes from Deadlands Oblivion portals. Before we wrap up this video, just a quick reminder that you can check out everything you need to know about this build and more in the written guide, where I have tons more information listed. That includes the mythic version of the build, the non-mythic version, alternate gear set options, alternate skills if you don't have access to scribing, as well as all the Templar passives and champion point breakdowns for 300, 600, 900, and 1200 CP. So no matter what level you are, there is a way that you can make this build work. If you'd like to check that out, the link will be down below in the description and the pinned comment. So make sure to check that out. And if you found this video helpful or informative, do me a huge favor and crush that like button. It absolutely helps out the channel. It tells YouTube to share this video with others, which is much appreciated. So thanks for doing that. And as always, I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video. Hey everybody, if you're struggling at all with the Elder Scrolls Online, I definitely know the feeling. I struggled with this game for months. The biggest problem I had was, even though the game says you can play any way you want, it never really teaches you how. Like I said, it took me many months of teaching myself how the game works before I could actually start to make builds that were truly effective and fun to play. Well, today I'm excited to let you know that I finally put down my system for creating builds into a simple step-by-step guide that you can now learn and use to create your own fun and powerful builds yourself. We're calling this the ESO Zero to Hero Academy, and it's being hosted through Podia, which is an amazing online learning platform. So far, our Ultimate Build Guide has over 25 lessons and over 2 hours of content designed to take you from a beginner to a master theory crafter, not in years like it took me, but in just a few hours. So if you want to check out the guide and preview all of the included lessons, just click on the link below to learn more.